You're listening to Conversations Along the Way, part of the Stoic Mom Project. At the SMP, we embrace the Stoic principle of the obstacle is the way, or that we can take the hardest things in our lives and use them as a way to learn and grow into the best versions of ourselves. If you're here, there's a good chance you're what I like to call a growth-oriented, non-affirming parent of a trans-identified young person. I'm Stoic Mom, a life coach who is also a growth-oriented, non-affirming parent of an adult trans-identified daughter. I've committed to having guests on this podcast who bring messages of healing. I invite professionals who I believe have expertise that can help you regain solid ground and reframe this circumstance in a way that supports you to learn and grow from it. I also invite other parents who found healthy ways to navigate this destabilizing circumstance, whose stories and strategies may inspire you. Today's guest is one of these parents. I hope you find value in healing ideas from our conversation. I was also thinking, I'm like, are you a graduated client?
I hope so.
Okay.
I don't know if anybody ever graduates from this, but I want to think that, I'm farther ahead than I was a year ago.
Yeah. And, when it comes to, like, we haven't had a conversation in a while.
Right.
And I know you kind of I could tell you were weaning yourself off there for a bit, right? Like, let's check in every once in a while. And then I would check in and you're like, no, I'm good.
Yeah.
How do you know you're good? Like, when I would ask you that, what was the evidence that you were solid and doing okay?
I feel like I'm living again. I feel like I have my life back again. I feel like I'm me again. I'm more engaged in my work and my business, with my hobbies, with the things that I like and that interest me. And now I kind of realize, because my husband always said, you really need help, and I can't help you, and you need to find help, and you're depressed. And I was like, oh no, I'm okay. It's, I'll get over it. And I didn't really realize how I was in a state of depression, or not having a lot of energy or interests to, I was like going through daily life like on automatic, but I wasn't really engaged and doing the things that fulfill me. I was too consumed with this. So now I can look back and I can think, no, I really was depressed. I really was, or didn't have any energy, didn't want to. I was on automatic pilot.
Yeah. Yeah. And you talk about it being consumed by it. And I think too, it's the word I like to use is destabilized, right? It just throws you off your game.
Oh, this is the most destabilizing thing that has ever happened to me, for sure. I mean, it really, really does. It totally destabilizes you. It's like, whoa.
And you're not somebody who lived a life free of tragedy either. You've
No, actually,
had
I've been a
big things happen.
widow, and I've moved around a lot. And, I mean, life is always full of obstacles. And I always was the type of person that overcame everything. I mean, I was, that's just who I am. I don't look back, and I overcome, and I do, and I'm always okay. And this hit me, and it was like I hit rock bottom.
Mm,
I
mm.
could not believe. I mean, it's still sometimes hard to believe that this is happening, but I could not believe that this was happening to my son. And then when I started finding out because I had like no idea, no clue. Like I
It just
totally
came out
live
of the
I
blue for you.
right. I mean, I was like, first of all, we don't live in the United States, so I think that's a blessing. So I was like totally out of, I mean, we don't where I live, this is still not like a common thing and the whole pronoun issue and this whole thing. So for me, it was like, this really exists. This is really happening. And when I started, um, you know, reading and listening and trying to get more information, I was like astounded by the amount of information and it seems so, like a household thing in the United States, the
Mm,
pronoun issue and just the culture. So, I live in a different culture. So it was like a whole brand new thing that I could not believe was happening to me or to so many other people.
right.
And it really hit me. Really. I can't begin to imagine what it must be like for somebody to go through this with a teenager.
Mm,
I, you know,
hmm. So your son, can you give us an
he's
idea of,
he's
yeah,
in his mid 30s
okay.
and it's been about 2 years now that he let us know that he was transitioning. Um like I say, there was really no indication whatsoever that something like this was even possible.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, he does share a lot of common that common thread with a lot of this type of people for the autism, the ADHD, bullied, shy, but nothing like really extreme. Um, I thought everything was okay. And so yeah, it is the hardest thing I've ever done or I've ever had happen to me.
So it came as quite a shock.
It was a total shock for
And
me and for our whole family. I
right,
mean,
right,
I would say that the rest of the family is still in disbelief.
right.
I
Okay.
mean, everybody's, accepting and getting on, but they still cannot believe that this is really happening.
Mhm. And so what was your initial response to him when he told you?
Initially, it was like, um, in the beginning, I tried to understand
Mm,
and I tried to listen and kind of, I thought maybe this is just like a phase or this is going to go away or, um, but I kind of realized also that he was like really depressed
mm,
and that there was something not well in
mm,
in himself and I guess in the end what really um hit me is the fact that meant that his mental health was not good and is not good and that this is something that is a strategy that he's using to overcome a lot of issues and situations that he has. And this is what he has found to be helpful. And so
mm,
I guess my initial reaction was to listen and to try to help.
mm.
And
Okay.
I got maybe too involved, and that was not good for our relationship.
Can you talk more about that? What was his reaction to your efforts to help?
I think in the beginning, because I was kind of, I mean, it wasn't that I was affirming because um, I wasn't affirming, but I was trying to understand and trying to help him. And he wasn't at the point where he was like insisting on like the use of the new name and the pronouns. And obviously, he doesn't live near. So, it's a different relationship when you have an adult child. But we had a very close relationship in our family. Although, the children are older, we still have a very close knit family. And, we do still do a lot of things together. And my kids, although they're all adults, have always called me and asked for help. And I don't know, we've just stayed together. So
you're a trusted mentor
beginning,
to your adult children, it sounds like.
excuse me?
So it sounds like your adult children see you as a trusted mentor, right? They'll come to you for
Right. Yeah,
advice
I
and
think
for.
so. Yeah, that's kind of what I always wanted to be.
Mhm.
I wanted to be there. And I don't know, that's kind of how I look at motherhood. But yeah, so in the beginning, I think that he thought that I thought that this was a good idea, or that it was
Mm.
okay, that I was okay with it. And because in the beginning, I really didn't think that. I thought he was just trying to figure things out. I really didn't understand. I had like no idea, no clue of the whole ideology of the fact that people medicalized, the fact that people, took medication and had surgery. And I had like no clue. I was like really in the blue of this whole thing. So in the beginning, I just thought, okay, I thought it was kind of strange and weird, but I didn't really understand anything. So I just kind of listened a lot and tried to, especially just listen. We had and ask a lot of questions. But then I started thinking, this is not going down the way I think it should be. I don't think um, that this is the right route. So I started, like most mothers, or family members, parents, but especially mothers, I started reading and getting information. And actually, it was him who um, introduced me, or gave me the tip, um, to find Sasha,
Oh,
because he
interesting.
mentioned a book. And I think it's the book about the teenage girls.
Oh, yes, irreversible damage. Abigail Schreier.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. He
Uh-huh.
mentioned something about a book by Abigail Schreier, who, blah, blah, blah. I don't remember what the conversation was, but that gave me a tip. And that was kind of how I got down the rabbit hole.
Hmm. Down the rabbit hole.
I found the rabbit hole
Yes,
because
that
up to then,
very
I had really
scary
not,
rabbit hole.
right. Up to then, I had not really found any information. I had found a few things, but they weren't really helpful. So then is when I started kind of finding all of that information and listening to Sasha and the detransitioners, and just Gender Dysphoria Alliance. And we all know all of Benjamin Boyce. And so I started getting a PhD on this issue, and I started attending some parent groups. And I think that was very helpful. Actually, in the beginning, I think it was very helpful because it really put me in a situation where I understood more of what was happening, and more of the dynamics of the ideology, and how dangerous this could really be in terms of, medicalization and surgeries, and the future. And that really scared me. That really,
Mhm.
really scared me. And I became a little, probably that's when he started noticing that I was not so on board. Because I really think that in the beginning, he thought that although maybe it wasn't something that I liked, that I was on board.
Okay.
and I was not on board at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's when then, we started having more friction in our conversations because I started getting a little bit, asking more difficult questions, um, and we started not being able to talk, and things got very, very complicated and were, in fact, I mean, we reached a point where we were basically not talking, and that, I think, for me was the worst part. For me, the fact or the thought of estrangement, and you hear and you read all of the stories about, you know, the estrangement in families and your children disappearing and never knowing again from them, and that just, I could not handle that. I mean, for me, I came to a conclusion that that was worse than him going through with this.
Right. And so I think, remind me, it does seem like though there was a period where you worked really hard to shut it down, right? Where you wanted to make this end, and that was kind of the MO in your conversation prior to this understanding of, oh no, no. And in coaching, you were very clear. I want to protect the relationship. That is my goal. How do I do that? Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was really how, and why I reached out to you, because what I was doing was not working.
Not working
And
to that end, right? I mean, I
right.
guess it wasn't
And
working to any of the ends that you were hoping it would.
exactly. And it wasn't working for me because that's when I really got in the state of major depression or depressed. Because I think in the beginning, while I was kind of learning and figuring it out, and we were still having a conversation, we were still in a relationship, it was okay. I mean, I didn't like it. I don't agree with it. I can't control it, but it was like, we're moving along. And but then when everything shut down and I realized that consumed me more than the whole trans issue. The fact that, we and it's not only myself, but our family, his brothers and sisters and the rest of, extended family could lose contact and the relationship with your own son. It's like it's just not something that I could ever imagine or I would ever think that could happen in a family. And I knew that I had to do something,
Mm-hmm.
that I had to do something to reestablish that relationship, which, now that I look back, I'm sure that, you know, a lot more than 50% had been my fault.
Interesting. Can you say more about that? What exactly was your fault? And
I think that maybe I got too involved, that I gave help when it wasn't really specifically asked for.
mm,
I was getting too involved and giving too much help and stating wanting to be right and wanting to control and just not accepting what was, and that, obviously he is an adult and unfortunately lives in this culture at this point in time and has made this decision and to live his life like this, at least for now.
mm-hmm.
And I just couldn't handle that. It was like I wanted to change his mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted him to see what I was seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And he was probably trying to help me see what he was seeing and change my mind.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
in the end, we know that we can't change other people's minds.
Right. Right. You know, I really feel compelled to talk about the trajectory to this point. You know, that you started out listening and trying to understand what he was going through and not necessarily supporting this choice, but being there for him. You know, he felt like you were there for him. And then you started to do your research, which I agree is important to understand the possible um, outcomes of this to a person's health. But I think that strikes such fear in the hearts of parents. Of course it does, right? We don't of course we want our children to keep their whole healthy bodies, and it makes total sense. And I think sometimes we can escalate things. We can make it bigger in some ways, you know, because of the way our fear affects our communication with them. And that causes them to dig in even deeper and to um, attach even stronger to this strategy than maybe they might have.
I totally agree with that. And I think that was a big mistake on my part,
Me too. I did the
because
same.
I totally think that I should have just, I mean, not gone along with it in the sense of affirming it and embracing it and yay, let's have a party about it. But okay, this is what you want to do. This is, it's okay. Go do what you got to do. Um, I'm
I,
here. I
I'm
I
here.
really do. I think the more that you oppose it, the more that they want to prove
Yes.
that it's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's two forces against
Yep.
each other that get nowhere.
Yeah. And when I said me too, what I meant was I did the same thing with my daughter, right? Like I let that fear drive my communication with her, and I did a lot of damage with that,
Yeah.
you know, to the
And
relationship
the
and to her
funny thing is,
ability to hear me. Yeah.
right, and the thing is that I knew this.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, intellectually, I knew
Mm-hmm.
this, but
Mm-hmm.
emotionally, it just triggered me so much that I was not controlling myself in the moments where I should have.
Mm-hmm.
But, we can't look back, and we can only look forward and take it from here. And what can we do now
Yeah.
and I think that's where you helped me, in the sense of, okay, we're at where we're at, and how are we going to move forward in a positive way?
And so what did you get from asking that question? Right? Like what how did that change the game for you?
Well, I realized that I was making myself sick,
Mm,
and that unless I did something to change and I continued in that hole where I was, I was going to make myself sick.
mm, mm,
And that I was impacting not only my own health, but the health and relationships of the rest of the family.
mm.
And we have an incredible family, and we have an incredible life, and we are very blessed and privileged, um, in regards to the abundance that we have and the things that we can do and experience. And I was making myself miserable, and it was impacting my relationship with my husband. It
Mm.
was impacting the relationship with the rest of my children, with myself. It was impacting the relationship I had with myself. I didn't like myself anymore. I didn't like who I was becoming. I didn't even like, it was like I didn't even know myself anymore. It's like I couldn't believe the things that, how I was feeling, and the low energy that I had. I didn't want to go out with friends. I didn't want to, because it was like, I know they're going to ask me about my, it's like I didn't want to be in the places that reminded me of this.
Yeah. Which it's hard to escape these days. Yeah.
Exactly.
And so to
And
avoid those triggers, we kind of retreat, it sounds like, is what I'm hearing. You
right,
just,
I was retreating. I was retreating into, not wanting to socialize, not wanting to. I was in a depression, although I didn't realize it.
mm,
And
mm,
I know that that is not good. And again, another thing that I started realizing is, I mean, there's already enough victims of this madness, and I was not going to become another one,
yeah, yeah.
because there are a lot of victims that are, the people that are in there and deciding to do this. But then there's everybody that's around them, which in the majority of the cases are the mothers, the parents, the siblings,
Hmm.
who are also becoming victims and becoming depressed and getting on medication or becoming suicidal, or getting divorces, or all of the things that happen when there's a tragedy or there's something like this that happens in a family. And I was not going to be one of those. I needed to overcome, and I needed to get out of that hole that I had dug myself into.
Mm,
Because in the end, and like I say, I think that, and I don't know how I would have ever reacted if this would have happened when he was a teenager.
right. Yeah.
I feel totally blessed and thankful that if this was going to happen, that it happened when he was in his 30s, because at least I was able to enjoy 30 years of him. And so I don't know. I don't, I know that, the majority of parents have teenagers, and it's easier to speak, I think, maybe from my perspective, where, we don't live together, I'm not responsible. It's a whole different relationship.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, but it's a different state,
Yes.
where, like in your case, you had your child living with you, and you're watching this happen on a daily basis, and you're still responsible
Hmm.
in sort of a way. And I think that's one of the things that helped me, is to really realize that it's not my responsibility anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
and I think that one of the things I've learned so much from this. and
Can
and
you
I
share
think
some things that you've learned?
I've I'm learning a lot about motherhood, about,
Mm.
I think we all have this idealized version of motherhood.
Yes. Yes.
And motherhood is, for one, it's forever. And
Mm.
that's why I guess maybe I'm mother forever.
Yes.
But there's so many different stages of motherhood. And I always thought that I was such a great empty nester.
Mm.
because, once they went to college and, they're, I think between 20s and 30s, when they're starting to become independent, but they're still a little bit dependent, in their early 20s. And then, they're off, they're starting to, make their own lives, and they still look up to you and ask you, or you're still their mentor, but they're not bothering you all day long. You know what I mean? And it's not hard work. Actually, it's like, it's really fun, actually.
Mhm.
You know, because I still felt like we were a family unit.
Right.
And so I thought, wow, I'm such a great empty nester. I don't know why people complain so much about having an empty nest. But I really realized, and this is one of the things that I'm learning, is that, empty nest really comes a lot farther away. That, between the 20 and 30s, it's really not an empty nest.
Ah, okay. Those birds keep flying home.
Yeah, it's still, and maybe in my culture even more.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that the empty nest is now starting to hit me.
Mm.
Now it's starting to hit me. Now most of them are in their early 30s and above, and now they're truly becoming independent.
Mm.
They
Okay.
truly don't need me anymore.
And how's that going for you, that
And
recognition?
it's I'm learning. I'm learning. I'm learning to step back
Mm.
and let them not need me, and not
Mm.
feel like I have to fix everything and I have to be there all the time, and that that I need to make my own life too.
Mm.
And that's why now I can kind of see really how depressed I was, because I wasn't really doing all the things that I really enjoy to do.
Mm.
I'd kind of
Mhm.
stopped exercising. I'd stopped doing my things.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think that I'm learning. I've learned also to be a better daughter,
Mm.
and
Say
I
more
think
about
that,
that.
I think that you never really think about what it's going to be like when your parents get old and elderly and depend on you. And when that hits you and that happens, which is, now my situation, it's hard. It's hard. And like there's a role reversal. And in the very beginning, I was like very impatient and very not compassionate or empathetic. And it was like a bother. And now I think this situation has helped me become more compassionate, become more empathetic, become more patient, and kind of look at things from different perspectives.
Mm.
I think that before this whole thing happened, I could only look at things from my perspective as like mom, super mom, you know?
I do. I think that, I've said this before, and this is who I kind of, put my message out there for, is growth oriented moms, right? Like, I think that's who really gets attracted to the Stoic Mom Project, are these moms who are very intentional in their learning, their lifelong learning. And so we're pretty sure we know how to do things, right? Like
And
we
our way is the only way.
That's right. And if people would just listen to us, their lives would be better.
Exactly.
And we're just trying to, help people.
Exactly. Exactly. We're trying to help people. And so yeah, I think that one of the things that I learned from you first was to change the narrative
Mm.
and change the story, that was very, very important for me. And to start looking at things from a different perspective, and to understand that there are different roles and that they change.
Mm-hmm.
And that, now my role is not super mom anymore here in
Mm-hmm.
this arena. I did that. He's very intelligent, he's very smart, he's very capable. And I have to trust that he's capable enough with everything that I gave him, all of the experiences, all of the education, all of the network of people and support that he's had to figure it out and to make the correct decisions. One of the things that's also happened is that I have become much more spiritual than I was before. Because in the end, there's just, I've realized that there's just some things that you cannot change and that are not under your control. And I have to let go and not want to control everything.
I'm excited to share that this episode of Conversations Along the Way is sponsored by Dream School, which is brought to you by the same three psychoanalysts who co-host the transformational podcast, This Jungian Life. For those who may not know, Lisa Marciano, author of Motherhood, Finding and Facing Yourself, and one of the founders of the Gender Exploratory Therapy Association, or GETA, is one of these three co-hosts. If you've been following the Stoic Mom Project since its early days in the spring of 2022, you know that the This Jungian Life podcast inspired me to start paying attention to the symbolism and meaning in my own dreams. As a result, shortly after my daughter's 18th birthday, I had a series of dreams that brought me much comfort and peace around trusting both her journey and the foundation we have provided her. I've continued to spend time pondering my dreams and researching the symbols that appear, and basically just hoping that I'm, air quotes, doing it right. So I am incredibly excited to be starting my own year-long Dream School adventure, learning more directly from these brilliant Jungian analysts how to, as they say, decode the language of metaphor and symbol and harness the power of my unconscious wisdom. And I'll be sharing my experiences and insights along the way. If you're interested in joining me in Dream School, just go to thisjungianlife.com to enroll. Use the coupon code StoicMom15 for 15% off your Dream School tuition. This is a significant savings, so once again, that's Stoic Mom in all caps, followed by the digits 1, 5. And I'll make sure to include this in the show notes, along with a link to This Jungian Life Dream School. How fun would it be to meet there in our dreams? And now, back to the conversation.
I wanted to ask how this shift for you is different from getting on board, right? Like this exercise of trust, and stopping those efforts of trying to change him, right? And letting him have his journey. How is that different from like getting on board or giving up on him?
Wow.
Because I think that's what a lot of moms think this work is asking of them, right? Is
Right.
to...
I am not on board.
Right.
I am not on board. And I never will be. I don't understand. I'm not on board. But I'm not on board on, how, for example, maybe decisions that my other children make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on board. And some of them affect their health also. Because, you could, I don't know, eat healthy or not healthy.
Right.
And I know that that's a very minimal thing compared to, what's happening here. But those are decisions that will eventually impact their lives in the future if they do that long enough.
Mm-hmm.
If you eat unhealthy long enough, that will impact your health in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s.
Yes.
And I can't control that either.
Right.
I gave them enough information, enough example during 20, 25 years, and now it's their responsibility.
Yeah.
So I kind of try to think about this a lot because I'm not on board on a lot of decisions. And I trust and know that they have the information and they are capable of making the right decisions. And now it's their responsibility. And
That's hard for
I think,
supermom to let go of, isn't it?
right, it's very hard, even when they're adults.
Mm-hmm.
And, and I think that's where we're talking about the role reversal now when the relationship with my mother and her bad health and situation and dependence. And, I see so many patterns repeating themselves, but now I'm aware of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can understand things that I didn't understand before.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that this has helped me become more of an observer. And that's also something that I learned from you a lot. Is becoming an observer, not being so like in things, like being a participant.
Mm-hmm.
And then when like I'm the participant, basically also because I think, I always think I'm right and my way's, the way, trying to help everybody get everything right, is just observing and watching and listening.
Mm-hmm.
So how is trusting and having faith not being on board? That's the question, right?
Well, there's a little bit of the answer there, I think,
Yeah.
when you phrase the question that way. Yeah.
I guess I just came to the conclusion in my situation is that he's an adult. I can't control his actions, his decisions, whether I like them or not. All I can do is respect them and pray that everything that I've done, which I know I did out of good intention and with the best of information that I had at that time,
Mm-hmm.
will eventually um, help him make the correct decisions for his life
Mm-hmm.
and get on with my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that you're not saying you know what the correct decisions are. You've given him a foundation to work with. And now he's got to figure it out for himself. And I
For
think
sure.
in this shift in the way that you're approaching things, you communicate that to him as well. You are a whole person and you have the capacity to figure this out. Right? Like you've said many times, he's very intelligent. He's a capable guy. And
For sure.
clearly he's going through some rough things. It looks
Oh,
like maybe there's even some mental health issues going on. And he's got the capacity.
and also I think what's another thing that's helped me is to understand the cultural moment that he's living in.
Yeah.
Where he's living and the cult, because it's different from living probably in, I don't know, India than in the United States. Not that I live in India, but, but I think culturally in the United States and the time right now, I can kind of actually even understand
Mm-hmm.
how he can come to these conclusions.
Yeah,
Not that
people
I agree with them.
respond. Right.
But I
Right.
can understand how somebody under the circumstances and under the climate culturally that exists, and that has existed the last probably 15 years or so, can come to these conclusions, which are
Hmm.
totally different from our cultural perspective.
Right. Right.
And our cultural perspective and the one that's happening right now in that environment in particular, um, is totally clashes. It's like opposing
Yes.
beliefs.
Yes. Which is not a new pattern. I mean, from generation to generation, this does tend to be the dance,
That's
right?
true.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
true.
This seems
And
really high stakes, and I get that.
right. And I think that also one of the things that this has helped me learn is to, we're not all going to believe the same thing. And although we don't have the same beliefs, we can still have a relationship. And not to try to impose my beliefs on other people, which I guess we all try to kind of do, is, we can agree to disagree.
So I'm imagining some people right now thinking, but we're right about this, and what they're doing is incredibly dangerous. And it's important to not call this a belief. We're talking about facts here, right? Have you seen that type of dialogue or that message out in the world that we're right and we need to stand in that and fight for it so we can shut this down, maybe?
I think I'm right, but other people think they're right.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
and I totally agree with the fact that we need to protect children
Hmm.
and we need to protect vulnerable adults. I think that's maybe one of the issues because, it's very focused on protecting children, but we don't understand is that there are a lot of vulnerable adults
Yeah.
because those children grow up to be vulnerable adults. And
Mhm.
I think that if we try to fight something,
Mhm.
it just becomes a war.
Mhm.
And wars never end up well. So I
Well, you
think
were
that
experiencing it with your own son, right? What was
exactly,
happening when you
you
were
know,
fighting it? Yeah.
it wasn't working. And and in the end, I think the hardest part about this whole thing, well, there's a lot of hard parts about this whole thing,
Mhm.
but the hard part is that it's one of those things that I don't know if I can say this or not, but you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? If you're like totally opposed, then you're in danger of losing a relationship with a
Mhm.
family member, which in most cases is, your child.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you don't oppose it and you feel like you're affirming, which goes against your own values or your own
Mhm.
beliefs.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that has been, for me at least, one of the battlegrounds is how can I be in the middle? Or somehow, what do I need to do to not lose that relationship? What's more important?
Yeah, and how do you do that in a way where you can still be authentic? Because that's what I'm hearing is this sort of false dichotomy. Either you're vocal about being against it, right? And that becomes your position and you fight for that, or you're somehow on board, right?
Exactly.
And on board with something that you disagree with, right? And so how do we engage with our children in a way that is authentic and in integrity with our own values and beliefs, without being in the fight?
That's the question.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it's been to realize that this is happening, that I can't control it, and to decide that the relationship, regardless of what he decides to do, is more important for me. To maintain connection, to be a supporting family, regardless of the obstacles and the situations that happen, whether we like them or not, to be there for each other. For me, that's more important. So one of the things that I've done is, not focus the conversation always on the same thing. We've decided that this is not something we're talking about anymore.
Mhm. It sounds like you're talking though, right? And that's
Right, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of other things to talk about. I mean,
yeah.
life, there's so much to do and so much that's happening in our lives that we can talk about, besides this. And
Mm,
that in the end, the essence of a human being is, it's the human being,
yeah.
the person, and that person is still there regardless.
Yeah.
And, so I just made that decision that this is more important, and it's still really hard.
Yeah.
It's really
Yeah.
hard. It's really, really hard, and it still triggers me. And
Mm,
there are moments that, but I try to focus on what's important. And what's important for me is to maintain our family connected, and helping each other. And that's what I'm going to work on.
and so, yeah, often I think what this demands is that clarity around your values and what's most important. And you got really clear on that. And that became what you were working on, is I'm going to get good at relationship. I'm going to get good at communicating um, with other people, and you really took that seriously. You were super clear on that when you came in. This is what I want to work on, and I think that can be so helpful. I think sometimes we get stuck um, in that destabilization, I guess, right? Like we're not clear what's most important to us. We feel like we need to both shut this down and maintain the relationship, and that can be really difficult, and so
Mhm.
deciding that relationship is more important helps you find a pathway that gets your life back, as you said, right?
Right.
And I don't want to say that this is the right pathway or the only pathway. This really does come down to a hierarchy of values, and some parents choose a different route. What becomes more important to them is to take a stand, is to stand in that truth of where they feel or how harmful this is, and that they will never get on board. Like I'm not communicating this very well, I think, because it's not the stand I took, right? So it can be tricky to describe this, but that's fine. You have clarity, and in that clarity, that gives you a path forward, if that makes sense. And I think then,
Yeah,
yeah, go
I
ahead.
just think that, like we've spoken, to oppose something and to get in a fight. And I think a lot of the times, there's this idea of, oh, the people that cause the estrangement are the parents. And I know that
Mm.
That's probably not true in 99% of the cases. I really doubt that. I mean, a parent is always going to want to, no matter what, maintain the family together and be close to their children. I mean, at least that's how I conceive family. I think that, you know, what happens most of the times is the other way around, but I just could not live with myself thinking that my son felt or perceived that we did not accept him or that we did not want him
Mm.
or that we kicked him out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think that no matter what happens, we need to continue working on keeping our relationship together and working. And whether we like what the other person is doing or not, obviously within legal and ethical terms. I mean, we're not talking about somebody that's committing a crime.
Mm-hmm.
um what I'm seeing is that it's a person that's struggling emotionally and mentally tremendously
Mm.
to find a place in this world,
Yeah.
to find happiness, to find a life, to be accepted, to be loved. And if the family doesn't give it to him, he's going to find it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so that's my job. That's my job. And I think also one of the things that I realized is that in that state of depression and that I was in, I was not setting in victimization that I was in. I was not setting a good example for my other children
Mm-hmm.
who are watching me just like crumble into pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who knows what's going to happen to them in the future, what obstacles or things they're going to have to go through, that they're going to have to be strong and overcome. I
Mm-hmm.
want to be an example for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also important. There's other people besides this person in the family.
Yes. 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 Yeah.
And those other people are also suffering because of this.
Mm-hmm.
They
Mm-hmm.
just suffer in a different way because it's a different relationship.
Yes. Yes. And I think it contributes to their suffering when they see it destroying mom. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was another reason. And I think you pointed that out to me a lot in our sessions, was one of the reasons that I had to regain my strength to become an example and not let everybody else go down the drain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Take the whole ship down. Yeah. Yeah.
Like they
Which
say,
mom
don't
has
give
the
up the
power to
ship.
do, right? Like we do have an impact. We're always having an impact. That's who mom is in the family, right?
Exactly.
But being really mindful of what that impact is. We think we're going to make the impact with our words and we're going to shut this down. But it's really more about the energy that we're bringing to the dynamic and the model that we're bringing to the dynamic, I think, is where the impact really is, and
Right.
our kids pick up on it. If we have created an attuned family dynamic, our kids are very aware of our state.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Um,
And another
Yeah.
thing I think also helped me is I think on one of your, I don't know if it was a podcast or something. I don't remember um who's the person that came in and talked about the CT model or CTWF or something like that model.
Oh, CT4. Yes, yes. Yeah, that was Lisa Salamoni. She's
Okay,
another life coach
right,
and another mom. Yeah, and I've done an interview with
exactly.
her. You're getting some
And
messages, it
she
sounds
said
like.
one thing that she said, it was never about gender.
Yeah.
And gender's like this whole thing that's always revolving around this situation. It's not about gender.
We make it about gender. Yeah.
And at least in my son's case, it's not about gender. It never was. There's so many other things that this is just what he's grabbing onto.
The strategy.
And that's what he needs to figure out.
Yeah.
And I can't do it for him.
Right.
And I think maybe that's one of the things that as mothers, especially mothers of our generation, we wanted to do give so much to our children that it's really hard to let go and let them make their mistakes.
Yeah, I'm going to ask another question that I think factors in for moms, in our desperation to make this stop for our child,
Mm-hmm.
is it feels it's almost embarrassing. Like, this can't be happening to my family,
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some shame in there.
It
And
is.
so
There is. There is. There really is. And
it
not
becomes
only
our problem, right? Because this is happening in my family and I have to shut this down.
exactly. Exactly. You do. I mean, because I feel like it's like, how do you explain this to people? I mean, what do you say? I mean, it's like, especially, I mean, obviously, maybe with somebody that doesn't know you, you could say, oh, well, I have a daughter instead of a son. I mean, you could say that and they don't know you, they don't care, whatever. But how do you handle this with everybody that knows you, that how do you explain that all of a sudden, especially when you don't even believe it yourself? I mean, I don't believe that I now have a daughter instead of a son.
Right.
And so how do I handle this in my social circle? It's really hard and and makes for stress.
Yes. And I think that's sort of the ultimate sort of test of radical acceptance, when it's no longer your problem. When you can say, yeah, my son thinks this, or he's going through this thing, and it's not your thing, it's his thing.
That's
Yeah.
true. That's true. And, I'm not there yet.
Mm. Okay.
It's like I said, this is a process and this is something that I feel will, is a process that gets better every day. And you find ways to, with help from people like you, to change the narrative, to be more understanding and accepting and not controlling and let go. But it's still something that kind of hangs over you and is there. But every day gets better.
Well, and I would think that thing keeps asking more of you. It becomes this context, I believe, for personal growth, which again, you just really seized on. How can I grow out of this? And how can I show up differently? Learning from this circumstance that I didn't ask for, right?
Exactly.
I didn't create this. This landed in my lap. My son brought this to me. And how can I use it to become a stronger, more resilient, more open-hearted, you said more compassionate and understanding person? Like this really did affect the way you see the world and the way you show up in the world.
It really has, because I personally am not, or wasn't, a very compassionate person. I'm much more like, get on with it and stop complaining and just do it. And I was not a compassionate person. I'm working hard to be that, and be more empathetic with people, and be more understanding, and listen more to people, and really try to understand what they're feeling. I think that's like one of the things that I've learned. But in the end, I think that one of the things that I liked and really resounded with me from the very beginning with you was, instead of asking the question, why is this happening, is what's it happening for?
Mm.
And I've asked myself that question many, many times. What is this happening for? What do I have to learn out of this? And what I learned, one of the things I learned, is that I'm not invincible.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
There are things that affect me.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that are hard for me,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I've always been very capable of doing things on my own and getting things done, and was just one of those things that has made me really have to work
Mm.
and understand myself, and those things that I had to become better at, which one of those was to be more empathetic and more compassionate. And the other thing was to be more of an observer,
Mm.
and not always think my way was the way and I was always right. Or not, I mean, I still think I'm right, but not try to impose I know I'm right, but not try to impose my righteousness on everybody. Because obviously they're right in their context, because they have a different life than I do. They have
Yeah.
different experiences from, and they're right also.
Yeah.
So this is a journey. And for some reason, this happened in our family. I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, I would ask, how has these lessons of becoming, or knowing you had room to grow when it came to being more compassionate, right? And being more tolerant of other people's viewpoints, how has that changed your quality of life and affected other relationships? You talked about your mom, and how much more understanding you have for her, and how that's become uh, this has shifted the way you're showing up in that relationship.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure. And I think that's really important, because obviously she's an elderly lady and is totally dependent. And I need to be there, and be there in another way that I was. So, and also because it's teaching me, that one day I can possibly be in the same situation. And how do I want my children to show up in that situation?
Yeah.
I would not want them to show up the way I was showing up.
That's a big deal. That's really powerful.
And it's hard work. It's really hard work. But
It's being
that's
conscious, right? Being conscious in the moment. Does that make sense?
exactly.
Yeah.
And just more than anything, understanding how she's feeling, and just accepting that, and not trying to change and convince her of something different.
Mm.
So this is something that I've really learned, and that relationship has improved. I think the relationship with my husband has improved. I think he's been extremely patient of the 2 years that I've gone through. And I'm totally grateful for that because I am sure that he has also suffered from this. He's not my son's father, but I mean, he's he has, he's been there, and I'm really grateful for that. So I think our relation has improved because I've worked more on communication skills,
Mm.
and that's helped me learn a lot on how to communicate with him. So that's been really good. And I just think in general, when I'm out and I meet people or friends, other family members, is just, I don't know, I just feel different. I feel
Mhm.
like I can be more attuned to their
Mm.
needs
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
always wanting to impose myself or the way I think or want to do things. So
Mhm.
I'm much less stressed,
Mm.
I
Okay.
would say. Yeah.
And has this had any impact on the way others respond to you, would you say? Do they pick up on this difference in you?
I would think so. Yeah, I think so. I think so. I mean, I'm still working on it. I'm not
Sure.
perfect yet.
Well, we have, yes,
Getting
long
better.
ingrained patterns, right? That take some
Exactly.
practice.
It's very deliberate.
Mhm.
You have to be very intentional and deliberate because, like you say, yeah, it is. I've been doing this for a long time.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
So
I think
now
some
I
people
think,
would say it feels inauthentic. What would you say to that, well, if I feel like I can't be authentic if I'm being that conscious in my
no, I think
vision.
I'm just evolving into a better human being.
Mm, wow. Okay.
And I want to look at, I mean, I don't like the situation. The situation is really hard. It sucks. But I'm going to look at the positive outcomes. I
Mm,
have to look at that. If I don't look at the positive things that have come out of this, I'm back in that hole. And I don't want to be there.
yeah.
So I'm not focusing on, one of the things that I stopped doing a long time ago was, uh, listen and read. I still keep in touch. I like your blog, and I keep it, I keep it in the radar, but
Mhm.
just very sparsely.
Yeah.
And I'm now using that time to read and listen to the things that interest me and
Mm,
that make, that I like, and
mhm.
that but I'm really, really, I think maybe even something that could be helpful is to make a list.
Mm,
I mean, and this could probably sound like really, I don't know. I mean, how can anything good come from this? And maybe 2 years or a year and a half ago, I would have not even been able to contemplate that. But now looking back, I can contemplate making a list of the good things that have come out of this.
mm, mhm.
And those are the ones that I choose to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are a lot of them. And I would probably say that now that I feel like I said before, I feel like alive again. I feel more alive than I was before.
Ooh,
This whole thing. You know what I mean?
yes, I can relate. Yes. Yeah.
Because now I feel like much more grateful and much more present, and that I really need to take advantage of each good moment that we have.
Hmm.
You never know when one of these moments is going to hit you again.
That's right. That's right. Yes. Yes.
I mean, because, this is something that happens, but there's a lot of other things that happen. People get sick, people have accidents. You know, there are a lot of, life is tough. And now we're in a good moment. My son has to handle his situation. He needs to figure it out. He needs to get on with his life. But I'm in a good moment focusing on the positive things.
Yeah.
Sure, that's there. I don't like it, but there's nothing I can do about it.
Right.
There is nothing. I mean, literally nothing.
Right. And so
So
immersing yourself in
I
that
can't continue
situation. Yeah.
to be dragged down by his situation, which I cannot change. He needs to drag himself out, which I think he's doing.
Right.
I think he's
Right.
doing. I don't know the outcome,
Uh-huh.
but I think he's doing. I think he's doing better.
Okay.
I think he's doing better mentally.
So he's
I think
figuring
he's in a
stuff
better
out.
state.
Okay.
Yeah, I really do. I don't really know where he's at because we don't talk about that, but I think he's doing better. And that makes me happy,
Hmm. Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And it's not dependent on whether he still identifies or not. Yeah. Right. Right.
I'm not going to even get involved in that anymore.
Mm.
I think the more that I get involved in that, the worse that situation gets. So what am I going to do? I'm just going to enjoy the moment.
Enjoy the moment, be present. Yes, be open to life. Let the joy back in. So,
Exactly. I mean, really.
yeah.
And now I look back and I think, wow, like I feel like, wow, I've kind of not wasted because, I've learned a lot and it makes me feel more grateful for what I have now, but I don't know. I would do things differently for sure.
And that's not an option. And so we can be grateful for what we've learned, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, this has been amazing, Mother Forever.
Thank you so much. Thank
And I
you.
love that. I love that name. Yeah. Um,
And I think, that somehow there's like a sisterhood
yes.
with the mothers and families that share this experience. And I totally admire uh, every one of them because this is a tough one.
Yeah. It is a tough one. It's hard. You've
It
said
really
that,
is.
yeah, I mean, you mentioned that you're a widow, and your son lost his father at an early age. And, the pain and destabilization of that tragedy, I can imagine thinking nothing was ever going to top that.
Oh, yeah, this tops it.
Yeah.
It really does. I mean, I don't know why, but this is just something so surreal
Yeah.
that it tops it. Because I think there's also so many other things involved in this. But I totally admire and all of these families and wish that the best for everybody. And especially that because I think in the end, what I realized is that I had to put my oxygen mask on. And it
I'll
took me
probably.
a long while to realize that
Mm,
I need to take care of me.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And if I took care of me, things would get better.
mm-hmm,
That it wasn't any of the external things that was happening.
mm.
It was inside of me.
You've been listening to Conversations Along the Way, part of the Stoic Mom Project. If you're interested in connecting with other growth-oriented, non-affirming moms, consider joining the SMP Online Community Center. This is a private, vetted community hosted on Mighty Networks and created specifically for moms who share this circumstance. For more information and to express interest in joining, please visit the SMP Community Center tab at stoicmom.substack.com. Thanks for listening, and always remember, humans have amazing capacity for overcoming adversity and healing. And I'm pretty sure you're human.